I'm Francesco Grisi. I'm the CEO of EDI. EDI is a visual effects company. What are visual effects? Visual effects are everything you see strange in movies or commercials. And how we do this? Working with computers on images that are shot with digital cameras. Nowadays, I would say 98% of the movie production and commercial production is done on digital cameras. And these video files are professional video files, are not standard video files like from telephones or small cameras, are very big and large video files. This is why we had to grow our storage, because the amount of data that we are getting every day, it's more and more large. And this is why we are very, very happy now with Qumulo, because we really need a storage system that is very flexible, that can grow with our needs. Here in our facility, we have something like 80 different workstations, and each workstation needs to access a part of the work because it's a teamwork and we do it all together. So we have a very strong infrastructure, a network infrastructure that allows us to access to any project from any machine at any time. In the last 3 years, we switched from working on like 30 shots in a single movie, and we are now working on 12 movies at the same time. And in each movie, we are handling like 200 or 300 shots. This is why we need a very tough solution. With Qumulo, everything became much easier.
While searching the best storage solution for us, I was very impressed by Qumulo's stunning analytics. It was the first time that I could see data giving us the real idea of what our IT system were doing on our data. After a great onboarding process that left nothing to improvisation, we achieved the full implementation process only in a few hours.
Now we are working mainly on 4K images. We are starting to work on some 6K images, and maybe in the next years will become 8 or 10K. This means that the images will become 4 times what we are using now. This is why Qumulo is a very good solution, because it's very simple to add new module and to have the storage grow. And this is one of the aspects, maybe the main aspect that convinced us to switch everything to Qumulo.
Okay, well, thank you for this great video. I think that was a great way to start the day with a nice success story. I think we can start because we have a good number of attendees. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aline Roland. I'm in charge of the marketing for part of the EMEA region, and today I will be your host. So we will have great speakers at Qumulo today, Stefan and Alessandro, that I will let them introduce themselves afterwards. So today we will cover many things. We will see who is Qumulo and where data storage trends are heading. We will have another great video with another customer success story, and Alessandro will be doing a product demo, and there will be a few minutes for Q&A. Please remember that you're all being muted. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to write them through the chat or in the Q&A icon that you see at the bottom. Also, make sure you do ask questions, because we will, after the webinar, select 2 winners randomly who will win a prize. So that's a good opportunity to raise questions. And also for all the attendees, you will be receiving a $30 Uber Eats voucher. Don't worry, the session will be recorded. So if you miss anything, if you wish to review it, it will be possible to get the replay afterwards. So I wish you a great session, and Stefan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Aline, and welcome everyone to our today's webinar. With me is Alessandro de la Vedova, sorry. Alessandro is here to help answering questions. So if you have questions, type them in the chat. While I'm talking, Alessandro will take care of it. And we also have time at the end to answer questions as well. Also, Alessandro will run a solution demo throughout the webinar. Hey, Alessandro.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Stefan, for the introduction.
Okay, so I'm Stefan Radke, based out of Germany, and I'm the CTO for Qumulo in EMEA. So let's start right away. So as a reminder, I think everyone who joined the webinar should know at least what we do. We help customers build file data lakes or large file systems, if you will, and in a very simple way. That's the reason why simply is marked in a special color. That's one of our most important assets and differentiators. I would say that everything with Qumulo is really simple. And I always promise, if I talk to customers, that if you use Qumulo, you don't need really a training. And we will see, Alessandro will demonstrate some things later on that is really as simple as I said it is. If you have ever managed a storage system, if you know what an SMB share is or what an NFS export is, there is no training required. And we hope throughout the demo, you will get a feeling of why that is true, and that is really true. So at the same time, we offer our solution on various different platforms, be it on-premise, on your solution or on your hardware vendor of choice. We don't allow everything, but we have a lot of choices that you can go, and that is also true for the different cloud solutions. We will talk about that also throughout the webinar. This kind of chart, I think you know from every storage vendor that data, specifically unstructured data, and we have heard from the video example, just one industry that we are successful in, that data is growing significantly. It's in the case of the video, we have shown that a visual effects company who produces videos and does special effects for movies and ads and so forth. It's more like the size of the data. For other industries, like think about IoT solutions, manufacturing is more the number of files that you need to manage and not so much the size of the data. And that is very significant. And Qumulo has really a solution where it doesn't matter whether you talk about a single file that has 50 terabytes, that is easily possible, as well as like 10% of our customers have more than 1 billion file in a single namespace, in a single file system. And you know from your experience, if you have other solutions that, for example, contains 5 million files in a single directory, that becomes very difficult to work with. And in Qumulo, we have a solution where it doesn't matter how many files you have or how big their files or how small their files are. That's the way we have designed the solution, because that was definitely a weak point of all other file system solutions in the market, specifically dealing with large number of files. If you look at the industries that we are working in or that we provide solutions for, it's really across the board. And I could talk about every of these examples here like an hour, but that would probably be boring. If you come from a hospital, you probably don't want to hear about commercial IoT. So this is just a reminder that everything that's unstructured data, Qumulo is really a good platform for. And regardless of whether it's in the cloud or whether it's in your data center, we think that we have the most modern solution when it comes to multi-protocol NAS solutions. If you turn that around, that's probably a bit easier to see where Qumulo would probably not be such a good fit, because that is a very small amount of applications. And basically, if you have applications that do a lot of small random IOs, for example, an Oracle RAC database, that would be a lot of small random 4K IO patterns. Well, there are solutions that are better suited for that. So a relational database is a good example. One other example might be like a virtual machine data store where you store your VMDKs to boot your Windows workstations from. Well, that is also something that is, functionally working, but that's not the primary platform to do so. It's absolutely fine for an NFS data store to store all your data from your virtual machines. But if you want to boot your virtual machines, there are definitely better solutions. But they are just, these two examples are almost everything I could think about where you probably would use a different solution. Everything that's unstructured data, regardless of the file size, regardless of the file number, that's really a good target for Qumulo. Well, most storage solutions in the market can somehow address some of these issues. Some of them can't really scale, even like one of the vendors who is very long in the market, it's has a very good market share, they still not have a scale-out solution. That's still a dual controller kind of solutions. And some of them are really difficult to deal with, and you all have your support experiences. We will talk about how we do support and why we have very good NPS scores in the industry for our support. Some of the vendors don't have really a good path to the cloud. They offer some tiering kind of, or some bringing your hardware to the cloud, but not really natively integrate into the cloud. And many companies are on the path towards the cloud, or they have some intentions to go to the cloud, and then they need a file system. And wouldn't it be good, instead of creating something new, or use some file systems that are available in the cloud with very limited functionality compared to what you know from on-premise, to have the same look and feel, the same APIs, the same performance, the same licensing mechanisms that you know from your on-premise world. And that's what Qumulo can deliver. And then many of the existing solutions don't really provide you insights into the data in real time. And what we mean by that will be shown by Alessandro later in the solution, right? So if you think, like, for example, you have a performance problem, some users are calling you and are telling you, the storage system seems slow today. Can you help me and figure out what's going on? Is there a bottleneck on your storage? And then, yes, you start using your monitoring tools. What it typically tell you is, oh yeah, there's this network adapter, there is a huge 2.5 gigabyte ingest on that. And then you probably identify some RAID arrays, which are heavily utilized. And then it's up to you to figure out which application is that related to, right? Because these tools, they don't tell you typically, they don't look into the file system, they look at the infrastructure to tell you where's your bottleneck, but that doesn't tell you the root cause. And as we will see later on in Qumulo, that's just one click away to tell you exactly where the problem is, how the system is being used from the application and the user's point of view, and not just how your RAID areas are utilized. And then you have to figure out and do investigations on tracing back what user that is or what application is causing that. And then about automation, like we have like every modern, I'm sorry, a very modern solution typically have APIs, REST APIs, and we do have that, right? Everything that you can do with a cluster can be automated through APIs or CLIs. There is no exception here. There's a primary interface, everything you can integrate. If you think about cloud implementation, we provide fully automated scripts to deploy a cluster, for example, in AWS in about 5 minutes, really. Yeah, here's just a kind of reverse of these arguments, like what are the pain points and what would you like to have in the future? I will skip this slide because you will see a lot of things that we go into and point by point to address these issues. So what you should know from our product, you will see some marketing terms here. That's server queue and that's cloud queue. But think of it really as just marketing terms rather than product features. We use the very same code in cloud as well as on-premise. We just, name the domains. Like server queue is the solution that you can deploy on-premise, and cloud queue is the very same solution, very same code, very same functionality in the cloud. So what we provide on premise is you don't have to use specific proprietary hardware, so the appliance-based approach, which also has some advantages. I will talk about that in a minute. We have a world-class support, and we also will let you know why we think our customers think that way. And then you can really enable a true hybrid and cloud environment because our solution runs in both worlds, and even the data can reside in both worlds at some point. And what it delivers also is a de-risk of cloud migrations, because if you have a solution on premise that works for quite some time, then you could do that same thing in the cloud, and you know how it works, you know the performance characteristics, you know the management, you know the API, and that is really of de-risking. You don't need to look for something else. You have one solution. And think a moment of, we will not talk about so much about multi-protocol support today, but what Qumulo delivers is really a multi-protocol support. That means the same data can be accessed through SMB, through NFS, through FTP. If you look at native cloud solutions, regardless of which cloud you look at, that's not the case. If you look at file systems that are provided by AWS or Google, they provide either or. So it's either you have NFS or you have SMB. If you want to access the data through both protocols, you need to copy the data and then translate all the permissions, which is a nightmare, really, and could say in practice, it's not working. So, and that's one of the big advantages for Qumulo. Many companies deploy a multi-cloud strategy, or they don't know yet exactly to which cloud they want to go. And for Qumulo, it's easy. Like if you have a dual cloud strategy, you have 4 solutions to support. If you use their native file implementations, you would have to use like EFS in terms of NFS for AWS, or another or another solution for SMB, the same in Google. So that would be 4 different solutions for 2 protocols and 2 clouds, with different APIs, with different management, with different pricing structures. That's not really good, and you can't really replicate data between them, and that all is solved by Qumulo. You have one solution for everywhere. And then, of course, you don't have to re-architect your solutions. If you migrate solutions in the cloud, well, the providers would probably recommend you to re-architect to be able to work with object storage, which is good for some cases, but some applications can't really be re-architected, or REST API access like S3 is just not fast enough, and you need a file system, right? So, and that is where Qumulo also comes in as a really good solution. All right, so let's have a quick look on the overall architecture at a very high level. We have a scale-out system. That means it runs on multiple servers. And we use commodity servers like x86 servers. We have to, you know, these servers have to provide a pretty quick network connection. Typically, it's 25 to 100 gig. We have mentioned here 10 to 100 gig. So some of the archive nodes can live with 10 gig, but most of the time we recommend 25 to 100 gig because the network needs to be very fast, at least for the inter-node communication. We run a standard Ubuntu Linux on top of it that we maintain. The customer doesn't have to take care. We throw out everything that's not used by Qumulo, and we deliver upgrades regularly, so you won't even recognize that there is Ubuntu beneath it. But if you know it, right, you feel home once you log in, but that's not something you need to take care of. And then on top, we run our Qumulo core software that builds the file system on top of this infrastructure. It runs completely in user space, which makes the solution very secure on one hand, and also relatively portable on the other hand. We don't have like many kernel interactions with the Ubuntu Linux system, so we don't have plugged-in kernel modules, which means we are very portable. We can change the underlying Linux system very fast. It's not a big project for us. And then, as I said, on top, you can access all your data in a single namespace through SMB, NFS, FTP, HTTP, and all at the same time, right? We translate the permissions and ACLs between the protocols transparently. You don't see that. You don't need to take care about it. It's just there. If you access data today with SMB and tomorrow with NFS, we make sure the permissions are translated in real time, and you can use the protocol of your choice at any time. If you want to expand capacity, it's very simple. Like you add another node and connect it to the network, and all the rest will be done by the cluster software itself. So that means there is no need to configure any RAID arrays and aggregates and volumes and putting file system on top of it and potentially rebalance it to be able to serve the capacity some applications. Nothing of it is required. You just add the node, you boot it up, and immediately the new capacity is available for all clients, period. If you want to limit it, you can limit clients or directories with quotas. They are even real time. But other than that, there is nothing you need to do. The rebalance, for example, of the capacity in the backend to all drives in the system will happen automatically. Here's a very high-level diagram of our software architecture. And I will quickly mention each layer and spend some words on each of the layers. First of all is the data access and authentication layer. We recommend authenticating against Active Directory, where you place, or typically, most companies have Active Directory. You can use local users as well. If you just say, like, I only have a couple of machines that accessing the file system, I'm fine with managing some local users on the storage, can be done as well. But typically would integrate into Active Directory. We can use LDAP for NFS group extension and mapping between NFS and Windows users, but that's not required typically. And then we have a REST API. As I said, everything can be managed through an API. And for convenience, we also support and provide a CLI. And not only you can log into the nodes to use a CLI, we have a CLI, a client version of the CLI for macOS, for Windows, for Linux. So you can even manage your cluster. If you are a CLI friend, you can manage your cluster from your own desktop if you wanted to. And of course, we have a web UI. We will see that later in the demo that Alessandro will provide. So, and then we have the data services that you would expect from an enterprise class storage. That's continuous replication, that's snapshots, that's quotas, that's auditing. Shift to S3 is a functionality that allows you to replication is something that you can replicate data from a cluster A to a cluster B. And the cluster B could be anywhere. Could be in the cloud, that could be on-premise, that could be at the end of the world. Shift is something that is kind of similar to replication, but the target would be an AWS S3 bucket. So that means you have a piece of your file system, that could be a directory and all of its subdirectory contents. You could create a relationship between that directory and an AWS S3 bucket and copy data from the file system to an S3 bucket and vice versa. So it could be good for data exchange, for archiving, for moving data to the cloud, for collaboration, all kinds of backup, all kinds of workloads would benefit from that functionality. That includes even an incremental copy. That means you have copied data today, someone is working on it on S3 or it's just even archived. Tomorrow you want to do that again, you just hit a button and then automatically all the incrementals, all the new data or the changed data will be copied to an S3 bucket. Then we have the file system data with our real-time query and aggregation of metadata. That is the feature that allows us to run everything in the file system without any tree walk functionality. So, and then this is where we protect data. I was mentioning earlier, like RAID arrays and how you protect data. We use erasure coding that is much more efficient, specifically in terms of administration, because if you think about, you have hundreds, potentially thousands of disk drives that you need to put into RAID arrays and aggregates and volumes that can get very complex. In Qumulo, you don't need to take care, right? You have just nodes, and then you just set the erasure coding scheme that you want, depending on the level of protection that you want. So the number of allowed drive failures, for example, or the allowed number of node failures at the same time. And that's it. And everything else is done by the cluster. And all the data is it's transactional. So if write data and a transaction is interrupted by the network or something, we roll back that that transaction. So it's really kind of secure. All data is encrypted automatically at rest on our cluster, can also be encrypted over the wire if you, for example, use SMP3 with encryption. So it's a very secure solution. And then this whole thing runs on a various number of platforms, and we'll get to that on the next slide, I guess. Yes. So think about this is the previous picture, our all software solution that can run on different platforms. We don't sell our own appliances like other companies do. So we are not locked in, but you can pick and choose from a variety of vendors that we design solutions with. So what does it mean? First of all, it doesn't mean you can use anything you have in your data center. We often get questions saying, hey, Stefan, we have 100 HPE servers here from a previous project. Can we use them? Well, my answer is most likely not, because what we want to provide is a very reliable and pre-engineered solution. Just like if you have, sorry, I lost my phone. That's just like you have an appliance experience without needing to buy an appliance. So that means with these vendors here, and this number is growing, we have pre-engineered configurations with different vendors. That's a work that we do together. And depending for the target workload, we design that solution together. We validate it. Performance, availability, reliability, supportability, that design work is all done. And as soon as we come with our software solution to install it, the software will recognize, for example, oh, I'm on an HPE server 192 terabytes. Then it would install and configure itself automatically. There is no need to read 900 pages like design guides for a parallel file system. Like there are solutions out there where you can do almost anything on any hardware, but that requires all this work to be done by you, and it's your obligation to make everything right. That's not what we want, and that's not what our customers, our commercial customers, like to deal with. They want to have something that like works as an appliance, but they want to have choice for their own hardware solution. Or if they buy new hardware, they want to do an RFP and invite different vendors to do the offering. So by the solution we have designed here, it's kind of, I would say it's kind of a mix between appliance and software defined, in that we have a set of hardware vendors and a set of different configurations you can work with. And we do definitely do the design and consulting with you to find the best proper solution depending on your workloads. But then you can pick and choose to buy where you want from. But you get the appliance experience. I have summarized this here in the next slide to give you a little bit the advantages and disadvantages of the different approaches. Like the legacy appliances that are offered for NetApp, for example, or Isilon, they have some advantages. If you deliver an appliance, the installation is very easy. Well, the management, it depends on, can also be easy, but like the legacy applications got pretty complex in the meantime. Hardware software integration is typically good because that's why you buy an appliance. That means, like, for example, hardware failures will recognize by the software pretty quickly because there's a good integration. But anything else is not so good. Like you have a vendor lock-in. If you have this software solution, you always need to buy their hardware. You don't have different hardware choices. Typically, you don't have cloud native integrations. Well, the other contrast is solutions where you have a software-defined solution. Think of it like Elastra parallel file system or a GPFS file system. You can only buy the software, so you have no vendor lock-in. You can do whatever you want. You have different choices of hardware, and sometimes you can also deploy them in the cloud. Well, is the installation easy? Well, not really, because you need to do all the design work with regards to availability, performance, and so forth and so forth. So that is typically the difficult part. Just to give you an examples, I have worked 17 years with IBM. They have a very good file system. It was called like GPFS. It has a different name today, but well, it's really can do almost anything. But the documentation is 3,600 pages. And that's the result of, well, there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of things that you can do wrong. And that's typically what customers don't want, right? Start a project just to implement a file system. That's not modern art, right? And I'm convinced that Qumulo has the best solution out of these two worlds. Through our valid certification with some vendors, down to the firmware level of the drives. We take that really seriously, right? That delivers an ease of installation approach, and we will see some customer voices later on that really guarantee, you know, we come in, we plug in the image, or we even install it over the network. Most of our, in COVID times, installations we do even remotely. And it's really easy to manage. You will see that. There's no training required. Through our integration, we have a good hardware software integration because our software knows all the servers it can potentially run on, and it's very good integrated. And so you have seen from the slide earlier, you don't have a vendor lock-in though. We don't sell hardware. You can buy the servers that we have certified from HPE, from Fujitsu, from Supermicro, or from Arrow. That's the largest, one of the largest distributors here in EMEA. So almost from any partner. There's thousands of partners who can potentially sell our solution, and you have choice. And this list of hardware partners who we work with is growing. So we are constantly working on making the software available, but it takes time because we take that seriously, right? And we talk about support experience later on, but since our software knows where it runs on, even though that's true for our support personnel, right? If they log into the cluster, they know exactly where they are. They know exactly how the storage layout is, how the high availability configurations are, how the network is being structured, and so forth and so forth. Because we give some requirements on how that network needs to look like, and that makes it easy and very supportable. So here's some other important attributes of our file system. First of all, you can scale as big as you want, almost, right? You can scale to 100 nodes today. That's something like 50 petabytes in a single namespace. There are very few customers who even want more. And then the real-time visibility, I talked about that quickly. We'll see that in the demo. Security comes in as a standard. We have a very much locked down operating system. Every service that is not being used is being thrown out and disabled. It's really just Qumulo running on it. It's very secure. We have many security solutions built in, from encryption by default, from role-based access control, from auditing. There's all kinds of integrated solutions. We have support. We work with antivirus vendors on all these kind of things. And then I talked about integration or automation. The REST API is really fantastic. We have even an interactive API explorer So people who automate, they love it. They can just test their API calls graphically and just cut and paste the JSON code into their scripts. That's really fantastic. And then we run in private clouds. That means your own data center as well as in public clouds, and the same look and feel. So I talked about innovation and software delivery. So we deliver software in stages. About every 2 weeks, we deliver a new software version that you can install. You don't have to, but you have choice to leverage new functionalities over time. And just recently, for example, we have announced Studio Queue and Recover Queue. Recover Queue, for example, is an option to install your disaster recovery cluster if you want to replicate your data because you plan for disaster or for high availability. You can have that second cluster in the cloud if you don't want to set it into your data center, or you only have one data center, you don't have two. It could make sense to pick and choose the cloud to replicate your data into the cloud, and we provide lower cost licenses to be able to do that. And you see a lot of other innovations. I could talk about, a day about this slide, but I just want to give you that idea of where we are coming from and that we are constantly adding functionalities and new features and new platforms with our software over time. I need to hurry up here. We have been named 4 times in a row as the leader of unstructured data that includes object storage and distributed file systems. And you can download the latest, the Magic Quadrant, the newest Magic Quadrant report from Gartner from our website. It's very easy, accessible. You don't. I think you only need to leave your name and email, and then you can download the full report. It's worthwhile to read. So as I said, like 4th time, we have several other recognitions from the industry. Most importantly for us is we have an NPS score of greater than 89 for 8 quarters in a row. That is an extremely high customer satisfaction. And that's predominantly the way we work with customers and support them through Slack. So if you have an issue, you don't need to call and open a ticket and then your ticket will be forwarded and hopefully someone calls back. No, you get a Slack channel, you get a dedicated Slack channel into our support team. You can ask your questions right away. You can even call the support engineers. And that is typically you get your help in minutes, right? Rather than needed to wait, opening a ticket, being forwarded. And that's what people love. They have a problem, they have a question, they type it in, and then they get an answer because we are 24/7 available in all time zones. And that makes it very convenient because that's the moment when you need us most, not when you buy the system, but when you have a question or when you have a problem, right? Problems are most in the NAS world, problems are most likely related in the networking and client world, but we will not stop helping you regardless where your problem is, right? Some proven industry logos that use our systems, you see that on our website. It's a quite long list of customers who trust us. And yeah, we will see a final video. Probably I skipped that video because we are already advanced in time to show you another video from another customer, which is a hospital in Belgium. In Belgium, and they have more than 1,000 workstations and doctors and clinical personnel who needs 24/7 access to the data, no matter what. This is kind of an interesting video, but I think we first give it to Alessandro to show us a little bit of demo on how our system works, because that I think is the most important part to see really. I promised you it's so easy to manage, and I will hand over to Alessandro with a use case saying, what would you do? Like your cluster ran full over the weekend, over last night, you are the administrator, and then you need to find out at least two questions. The first question might be, where is all the data on my cluster? It's millions of files, and you need to identify quickly where all this data is stored to be able to identify some low-hanging fruits where you could remove data to be able to work again on the cluster. The second question is, you may want to know, in the last 24 hours, who wrote so much data on the cluster and where did it land? What user was it, or what application was causing all this data ingest? If you think about how you do that on a normal array, the second question is almost impossible to answer without third-party tools and long queries that analyzes all your data, and that takes probably a day to complete or two. With Qumulo, you can see that in real time. And with that, I hand it over to Alessandro. I will stop sharing my screen and give us some little introduction on administrating a Qumulo cluster. Alessandro.
Thank you, Stefan. Good morning, everyone. I'm now going sharing my screen. And so you can see our production cluster here in Seattle. This cluster, we are using it for testing continuously our releases, because before making releases of our software available to the wider public, we test them internally and we use it internally, okay? This is an assurance of quality. And we have more than 500,000 of automated tests that run continuously in order to certify and qualify the quality of our code. So we are seeing an interface, management interface of the cluster. This is a Chrome browser, so it's manageable via a normal web browser. And we are seeing that this cluster is full at 38%. It's 468 terabytes. One thing very important to remember is that with Qumulo, you can effectively fill the cluster up to 100% with no performance impact. We know I have worked for 20 years with different storage systems. I've worked for storage vendors, and I was managing storage systems in critical environments like hospitals. We know that all storage vendors says, all right, when you are 80% full, please stop or expand your storage system. Otherwise, you have performance decreases and you start losing some features. For example, with some storage systems, if you are full over 85%, you cannot upgrade the system or you can take any more. This is a 4-node cluster. Stefan mentioned it before that we are a scale-out solution. So it's like Lego building blocks, right? Each block provides you with space, performance, and throughput. And this cluster is protected. On a small cluster like this, we can lose one entire node. It can go down and you keep working. This is a huge difference compared to the traditional scale-up solution, so the traditional NAS solution. If you lose one of the two controllers, you lose 50% of your throughput immediately. With us, you just lose one fraction. This cluster has 258 million files and 70 million directories. We have one customer in EMEA. They have currently 18 billions of files and close to 1 billion directory. As Stefan mentioned before, we can host billions and billions of files of any size. We have one customer in oil and gas. They are working with files that are as big as 30 gigabytes each. Here we have the usual indicators in terms of IOPS, throughput, and latency. But scrolling down below, we see a read and write throughput distribution in the last 24 hours, and the number of clients connected to this cluster, and what are the most active clients. As you can see, this is a hint, this is a little preview of the fact that Qumulo knows what each client is doing in regard to read and writes in terms of IOPS and throughput. And Stefan mentioned before, if you find yourself in a situation where your cluster is full and you need to immediately understand where the data has gone, where the data has been created the most, what are the directories that contains the most of the data, you immediately go on to the Capacity Explorer. This is a sorted list by size, and immediately you can see that in this build directory, we have 55 terabytes of data, 10 million subdirectories, and 84 million of files. And this is ordered. So you immediately recognize which are the directories that are hosting the most data. But sometimes when I was working in a hospital, and hospitals never stop, they always work 24/7, 365. I was coming to the office in the morning, and I realized that a lot of space was used over the weekend. I needed to immediately find where that space has been created and by who. So here we see in the last 72 hours, the capacity history, which is a kind of a flat, but the interesting part is this one. If I point myself here, I see that this morning from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning, that was a change. Someone created 260 gigabytes of space that was constant. If I click here, immediately in real time, no need to use external tool, no need to wait for the tree walk, nothing. It shows me exactly where that data is being created or deleted. Here we see a huge deletion of data. We click immediately and I have an answer. Now, if you think, what does this mean for you in terms of management? Means no waiting time, means being immediately able to assess the situation and respond, and going into this directory and check and see, okay, who was the user that created this or deleted this data. This is how we provide you with the great visibility of what happens in terms of space consumption. But let's go and see what happens when you have live applications that are working with the Qumulo file system. This is a sorted list, which is in real time and shows you exactly the different clients and the throughput that they are generating towards the cluster. Can be read or write throughput, IOPS, read or write. And you see that this is in real time. This list is changing, but there's more. If I click here, I can show you exactly the files that this application server is reading or writing. Now, when I was working in a hospital, one of the most critical systems that we had to ensure it was always working was a PACS system. PACS stands for Picture, Archival, and Content System. When you go to a hospital and you have an X-ray or a TAC or an MRI, all that images goes through the PACS system and lands onto a storage. That's a super important system, must be running smoothly all the time so doctors can work, surgeons can work, and so on. I wish I had something similar like this when I was working at my hospital, because if I had a doctor saying the PACS system is slowing down, I could immediately come here, select the PACS server, and see exactly what was the throughput that it was generating. So this is a level of visibility into what is happening in your file system that, you know, is unprecedented in the industry. There is no other storage system that can do this in real time. Again, super important, in real time. And of course, we want to make sure that we have an overview of all the throughput that is coming into the storage system, into the file system of the Qumulo. Now we are collecting a few seconds of data for sampling, and then we produce this graph. This is one directory, and 37% of all the throughput that we see here is landing into this directory. This is a subdirectory, this is a subdirectory, and this is the single file. So in real time, we can show you exactly how the throughput is distributed across your file system down to the single file. And we can do that for the throughput, but we can do that also for the IOPS, because we know that there are applications that are throughput intensive, others that are IOPS intensive. And here The story is the same. I point myself onto a directory. This says 21%, and you see that this changing real time of my IOPS is going into this directory. This is a subdirectory, and then the single file. So it's like you are doing an X-ray of your file system. You can see exactly what is happening down to the single directory, down to the single file. And this is extremely beneficial, not only for troubleshooting, but also for planning. And remember, we eliminated the tree walks. What does that mean? That means that if you have a directory that has, let's say, 10 million files inside of it, we eliminate the tree walk. And that means that application is not waiting for the tree walk to complete. We immediately get back to the application and say, these are the files, these are the sizes, these are the permissions, and so on. This makes a huge difference for all those applications that deals with hundreds of thousands or even millions of files. Let's think about content management systems, for example. And this is a 1,000 feet view of the file system. This is the root. This is the first level of directory. This is the second level of directory. I pointed myself in the root, and it shows me immediately what are the most active clients and the most active paths and files. If I click into here, I go into a subdirectory, which is home. Which are the clients that are working in this directory right now? These 3 clients, and they're working on these files. So you can explore your file system in a very detailed way and understand exactly what is happening at a very low level. The people from the application team sometimes call the operation teams and say, look, the application is a little bit slow. Can we please check? And then you as an IT admin, as a storage admin, you come and use into the analytics, and exactly you can respond in a matter of seconds. We have the space, we have a view of the analytics. Okay, let's make this space available for our clients and application. Let's create an SMB share. As you can see, quite easy. I'm gonna share this directory, and I made a typo here and they correct me, so it's intelligent. The share name is test, and this is, of course, demo. We can use access-based enumeration, and you can see we have contextual help, very handy. And of course, we want to give permission to this share. As Stefan said before, we can be connected to an active directory. So we recognize the users and the group of the active directory. And basically, that's it. It's create share, it's done. It takes 20 seconds. The same goes for NFS exports. I come here, create, okay. Which path you want to export? This one. And remember, we can export the same directory with both protocols with no permission issue. This is called cross-protocol permission. It's a kind of a magic. It works automatically for you and solves a lot of problems that you see usually when you share the same directory with 2 different protocols. You just say the export path, the description, and the host that can access this NFS export. And it's done. Again, 20 seconds, and it's done. Another thing that I want to show you, we said before that we release every 2 weeks because we are incremental in our release. How you can upgrade the Qumulo cluster. You come here, you just provide the new image file, you just click upgrade, and typically after 20 seconds, no matter the size of the cluster, being a 4-node cluster or a 100-node cluster, 80 terabytes or 20 petabytes, after 20 seconds, the upgrade is done. So one of the key principles of Qumulo is making your life easy at scale. No matter how big is your Qumulo cluster, no matter how many nodes, what you can see here is simplicity. We make your life simpler, and everything you're seeing here, this is a physical cluster on-premise, will be the same, exactly the same in the cloud. All right, so I'm getting back to Stefan and Aline. We have some questions in the Q&A. Of course, it was a very short demo. Please feel free to contact us for a full demo that usually takes 1 hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan and Alessandro. So we have a few minutes left. I see that a few questions were already answered through the chat. Another additional question would be, is there any script to bulk create NFS and SMB directories?
Yes, of course I can. Yeah,
go ahead, Alessandro.
Okay, perfect. So as Stefan mentioned before, we are 100% programmable. That means that we expose REST API that can be invoked in order to create hundreds or thousands of shares and exports. Actually, we have done that for a couple of customers, which had a very complex environment and they had to migrate. But it's very, very easy. We support Python bindings, we support PowerShell, we support raw invocation via curl. So pretty easy. That can be done in a matter of a few minutes.
Yeah, so that's right. So typically we help customers who have complex environments like hundreds or even thousands of shares to create them automatically. For complex migrations, I have answered that question already in the chat with Atempo. They have tools who can do that, migrating from one vendor to another. They have experiences. They do like 70% of our migrations. Some customers, they do that by their own. That's fine. But yeah, so we definitely help and make that easy as well. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's just, maybe we have time for one more. How often do I need to upgrade my cluster?
Yeah, so as we said earlier, you can do that every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we deliver a new version that most of the time we deliver some feature enhancements and maybe security issues, security fixes. But you don't have to. If you say like an upgrade takes 20 seconds, but you don't want to do it, then you can decide another good vehicle would be the quarterly upgrades, which combine every upgrades that have been delivered in the meantime to a quarterly upgrade. But you can also decide to do that once a year. Like 70–80% of our customers are actual of the last 6 weeks versions. But it's up to you. Like there is no like something that forces you to do that. But my recommendation would be at least do it once a year, because you will benefit from new features most of the time, performance improvements, and definitely security.
Thank you, Stefan. There's a last question, but we might take it after the webinar because it's about time to wrap up. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Stefan and Alessandro, for your presentations. We will take all the questions and come back to you. There will also be a link to download the Gartner MQ for more details. And if you have raised questions through the chat, we will definitely be in touch with you. You might be one of the 2 lucky winners of the prize. If you have additional questions, please let us know. And we wish you an excellent day. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Aline. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a lovely rest of the day. Bye. Thanks, Alessandro.
Bye-bye.
Bye.